Baptist Church. And lastly, Crew on Mount Meigs is a popular tavern with live music, dancing, poetry readings, and other events. And so today, Highland Park is a desirable neighborhood with strong educational, recreational, medical services, and opportunities. The Highland Park Community Association coordinates and promotes community gatherings, establishes communication among members, and keeps residents informed of civic and legal developments affecting property use, among other things. If there's interest among the community, then the Land Use Division would certainly be interested in partnering with the association to conduct survey and research work for consideration to expand the historic designation of Highland Avenue to the rest of the Highland Park neighborhood. So we look forward to collaborating in such an endeavor to help stabilize properties in the area, enhance knowledge of this neighborhood's rich history among the public, and strengthen community pride. And so last, I just want to credit some of my sources, including the local designation report, the historic marker at Oak Park, and McAllister's Field Guide to American Houses, as well as some photos from the Alabama Department of Archives and History. That's all I have.
Okay, all right. Question. Anyone has a question or a comment?
Yeah, I didn't know about the sanitarium actually I didn't know about that theater. Was the theater actually torn down, or what happened to it?
Yeah, I believe it's still there. It is, I think it is vacant, but there's like a sign about security doors or something. It was turned into like I guess a commercial sort of industrial building. But it is still there.
Does it say when the theater was constructed?
Yeah, let me just say you might not have known about that theater unless you lived in the area if you were black,
Yeah.
because you had no business being in that neighborhood.
Okay, I got you.
If you want me to be candid with you,
Yeah.
beyond Maggot Street going south and Cedar Street going north, you had no business in that neighborhood unless you were going to the A&P store across the street from that theater.
Right.
No business at all.
Okay.
Okay.
Or at the park.
Beg pardon?
Or at the park.
Yes,
Ran up park.
yes. And in fact, that was the reason that the park closed on 1 January 1959, because of the lawsuit that Mark Gilmore filed, and with Judge Johnson, and Judge Johnson ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, and he gave the defendant the option of integrating the park or closing it, and they decided to close it.
All parks. All Montgomery parks.
That's right, all of the
All
parks,
Montgomery parks.
black and white. So if you lived in Montgomery, if you grew up in Montgomery, say 58, going forward for the next 6 years, 7 years, excuse me, you were without a park. You were without, shall we say, outdoor recreation, because the parks were closed. And those animals at Oak Park, they dealt with them, and the pools, they filled them in, and all of that. Any other question? Yes.
Has there been any interest in expanding the district over there?
I've not, heard anything regarding that, but it's something that we could pursue. I think there is a lot of, I think it was focused on Highland Avenue because of the streetcar tracks that went down the median that is there now. But a lot of the, similar architecture is within the whole neighborhood as well. So it's something if the neighborhood is interested. But yeah, I haven't necessarily heard anything from that.
Any other questions, comments? No one? Well, just let me say how much we appreciate you're doing this, and I just want to add to what you've done magnificently here today. If a person were to drive around Montgomery, you'll get a feel when you've left one neighborhood and entered another. In other words, when you travel High Street going east, you can get a feel that you've changed neighborhoods. When you go on the South Decatur Street going south, you can get a feel that you're entering, you may not know the name of it, it's Cloverdale, but you can get a feel that the architecture has changed, the streets have changed, et cetera, et cetera. When you're going north on Ripley Street and you're getting Lower Wetumpka Road, you can get a feel that you're entering a new neighborhood that we call Boston and some other things. But you can, in other words, you can just feel that there's a change as you drive through these old neighborhoods that have changed. At least I can feel that I'm going through a different neighborhood. Okay. Any other comment anybody else want to make? Let me just end my observation with this one comment. In 1955, when we had a bus boycott here in Montgomery, one of the grievances was that we have black bus drivers, and when you do this presentation on Highland Park, excuse me, anybody who's familiar with Highland Park and the bus boycott, one point sticks out very clearly. In Highland Park, you had a black trolley driver. And that's something that most people never even can imagine. And if the people, protesters of the 1950s had known that, they would have known asking for a black bus driver was not as novel as it sounded.
Interesting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
And as we continue with our agenda this afternoon moving forward, we have a guest here, and his name is, excuse me, Shaun Dickerson, and he joined us this evening from Opelika, and I met him a couple of months ago, and I was really impressed with his interest in historic preservation. And I said to him when I met him how wonderful it was to see someone with that kind of zeal for historic preservation. So, sir, if you would just come to the mic and tell us how you got involved in historic preservation and what you're doing today and what historic preservation means to you.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. And I'm Shane. That's Shaun.
I'm sorry, Shane. Okay.
Don't worry, I'm just messing with you. I want to thank Dr. Bailey for arranging this invitation. He and I had a great visit in Opelika. When was it? Back in the summer. And we had an opportunity to get to know each other as we are planning for a wonderful event in Opelika in the spring with the Alabama Historic Commission. During World War II, and I'm going to answer your question by this little story. In World War II, there were people who risked their lives during the most heated part of the Blitz in London to save historic buildings. They were fire watchers. They stationed themselves on the roofs of some of the landmark buildings of London, particularly the Christopher Wren designed St. Paul's Cathedral. These people often forfeited their lives to save these buildings because they knew what these buildings would mean to generations to come. When they started to tear down Grand Central Terminal in New York City, the former First Lady, Jacqueline Kennedy, took it upon herself to start a movement to make sure that that didn't happen. And right here in our own state of Alabama, during the heated part of the Civil War, when the University of Alabama campus was being burned, it was the president's wife, the president of the university's wife, who went to the commanding officer of the Union forces and begged him not to burn the beautiful Greek Revival President's House that is the only building left standing of the original University of Alabama. If I had lived during those times, I would probably have been one of those people who would have been involved with one of these projects. That is my passion for historic preservation. I grew up in Washington County, Alabama, the first county of Alabama, and I spent many hours looking around the site of the first capital of Alabama, St. Stephen's. And my family's history, I'm a native Alabamian. My family's history goes back to my mother's descendants. I had a descendant who fought in the Revolutionary War, who was from Georgia. I had family who were involved with the Civil War and every war since. But I do have a passion for historic preservation, and when I moved to Opelika from Washington County in 2000 to teach, I was told about this unique group that existed in Opelika, and I immediately wanted to get involved. And so since 2002, I have been a part of this group, serving as president for just over 10 years, and now serving as a vice president and manager of our very prized headquarters, the Brownfield House, which you'll see in a moment. We have a very unusual situation in Opelika, the way our historic preservation is done. We have a historic commission which is run by the city, which would be your counterpart, except that I believe Shaun told me that you have another group that approves architectural changes and this kind of thing. In Opelika, the Historic Commission does all of that. They are appointed as you are. But before the Historic Commission, there was the Historic Preservation Society. We are an all-volunteer, nonprofit group that was started because there was no protection of historic buildings in Opelika prior to 1979. And these people felt a need to fight for these buildings, and then finally they helped to get the Historic Commission established. And now we have guidelines and rules, just like you do. We have 3 historic districts in Opelika: the downtown, the North 8th Street Historic District, which is famous for its Victorian front porch tour, and then the Pepperell Mill Village Historic District. We, being a nonprofit group that is in no way associated or attached to the city, we have no political pulls or interests, and so our organization can sometimes do things that the Historic Commission cannot do. We can organize people to do things when we feel like that there is something that needs attention that is not getting attention from the Historic Commission, and then they will usually give it attention. We work very closely with the Historic Commission and Lisa Harrelson, who is who is chairman of that group, or she's the city's representative for historic preservation. And we've done several projects with them. But I wanted to just briefly run through a little presentation here to show you some of the things that we have done. And I know maybe you can see this on your computer screen. If not, I encourage you to turn around and look at it on the big screen. You'll probably enjoy it a lot more. These are just a few of our past achievements. The picture you see there is the entry hall to the Brownfield House. It's an 1850s Victorian Gothic cottage that we saved from being destroyed, and we moved it and turned it into our headquarters. You'll see This is the Brownfield house. This was built by the first physician in Lee County, Dr. Robert Brownfield, and the house originally sat on the south side of Opelika, probably 10 blocks away from where it is now. This is the site of a former school. It was made available to us from the city, and we moved the house there and restored it. This was done in the 80s. I was not involved at that time, but this is currently our headquarters, and we offer this house as a venue for different gatherings at modest prices, and it helps to keep the house running. In Opelika, one of the parks is known as Monkey Park, and it's known as Monkey Park because there were absolutely real monkeys that at one time were there, housed in cages like you would find in a zoo. And recently that park has gone through a big renovation. We were involved with that. This is the famous Rocky Brook Rocket, which runs through the park, and it runs several times a year. They just overhauled it. We were involved in this project as well. This is the oldest house in Lee County. This is the famous gingerbread house in Opelika. It is a Gothic-style farmhouse, and this house was scheduled for demolition. This was before there was a historic commission. Thankfully, OHPS stepped in, purchased the house, secured it, repaired the roof, and then we found a buyer for it. This is the Darden House, where I met Dr. Bailey. This is the home of the first African-American physician in Opelika. It was in very, very dire straits when it was rescued by a number of groups, including architecture students from Auburn University and our organization, to restore it, and it is currently in use now by the community. This is the depot in Opelika. Dates to the 1920s. It was restored after being derelict for a number of years. Our organization was involved with this, and the depot is currently being used as a daycare center. This is one of the events that the Rocky Brook Rocket is involved with every Christmas time. They have the Reindeer Express, and all of the park is decorated for Christmas, and the children can ride, and all of this is done free of charge. OHPS is involved with, as many historic organizations are, with the erection of historic markers. And throughout Opelika, we have approximately 50 historic markers. You'll find OHPS's name on most all of them. We paid for most of the signs and for the cost of putting them up. This is the Girl Scout hut in Opelika. We funded this project several years ago to the tune of about $6,000 so that they could put new windows and doors in it and secure the building and make it possible for the girls to be in there and not freeze to death in the wintertime. This is a house that we're very proud of. It has not been fully restored on the exterior, but this is one of 5 remaining houses in the state of Alabama with a mansard roof that is still intact. The plans for this house are held in the Alabama Archives and History Department. We purchased the house. It was also scheduled for demolition, again, before there was a historic commission. We purchased the house, put a roof on it to stop the leaks, and we found a buyer. The interior of the house has been about 90% restored. It's beautiful. The guy's an amazing craftsman, and he'll eventually get the outside done. This is the Thompson Chapel AME Zion Church in Opelika. Dates to the 1870s. We have made some funds available to this church for the purpose of doing some restoration work there. This year we're excited. If you've ever attended the Victorian Front Porch Christmas, I encourage you to come back again this year because it's all new. The lady who created the figures, Jan Jones, took them all to her studio in Fairhope last year, and they are all being redone, recostumed, and even new scenes added. And this runs through the second weekend of December. And OHPS not only is involved in funding some of this, the Brownfield House is open to the public for this event. And we serve refreshments and have entertainment. Last year we had approximately 2,500 people who came through the Brownfield House. This is our most prized preservation project. As I said, the Brownfield House was literally falling down when OHPS got it, and it didn't look much like this at the time. And fortunately, they found in some archives, OHPS found photographs of what the house looked like in the 1870s, and they were able to put it back together using those photos and to recreate the gingerbread lattice work on the front. This is the entrance stone from the old Pepperell Mill that burned a few years back. They wanted to preserve part of this mill, and they took the stone. The stone stood above the entrance, and it's now on the site of the Museum of East Alabama, which is in downtown Opelika. OHPS again was part of this project. To raise money a few years ago, we created these historic flags, which you can see hanging from under the canopy at the Museum of East Alabama. And these can be displayed, and it promotes historic preservation, and it promotes our organization as well. This is the Emmanuel Episcopal Church. This is the oldest public building still in use in Lee County. It is built of native field stone, and they were not only the recipients of our Historic Preservation Award this past year, but they also received one of our preservation grants, which I'll tell you about in a moment. Each year, we make available many grants that we do through fundraisers that we have through membership drives, and then an event that we do each spring. These grants can be in the neighborhood of $3,000 to $5,000. We have a simple application process that any individual who lives in a structure or has a business that's over 100 years old in Opelika can apply for these little grants, and they can get help. These were the first two winners of the grants in Opelika. They each received $5,000. This is our current project. We have researched this, and this is the only remaining structure in its original place at a German POW camp in the United States. And we are working to try to gain some funding to help to restore this structure. Opelika had one of the largest POW camps in America. Several thousand prisoners were there. It was literally a town within itself. And this has been quite an interesting research. We've been working on this all summer to determine whether or not this was the only original structure still standing. And we have literally contacted every historic society in every state where there was a POW camp. This is our mission statement. I know Dr. Bailey mentioned yours in the beginning. To discover, protect, and revitalize the cultural heritage and related architecture of Opelika. and to educate our community and visitors about our rich history. How do we do that? We do it through outreach, such as what I'm doing right now. We make tours available of the Brownfield House. We have walking tours free of charge that can be arranged through our historic downtown. And again, when we need to be a voice for a structure that cannot speak for itself, of course, we become that voice. We found several years ago that several of our most historic houses in Opelika were being torn down by churches, because at the time churches were exempt from the historic ordinances. We decided that it was time to stop that. So we went to work and we met with the city council, attended many meetings, and we made it clear that churches needed to follow the same rules that everybody else did with regard to preservation. That was coincidentally not in the original historic ordinance. Churches were not exempt. That was done as a political favor in recent years to accommodate moving a building that should never have been moved. But thankfully that won't happen again, because that exemption has been taken out and now everybody follows the same rules. We do it also by working with the Historic Commission. I was nominated to be on the Historic Commission in Opelika recently, and I turned down the nomination because I would rather do what I'm doing, because I'd like to work with the Historic Commission, but I like the idea that we are not attached to any political entity, so that we can push things sometimes through, or help the Historic Commission push things through that they can't do by themselves. Now I'm going to move away from the microphone for a second, because this is always the way I close with a meeting or with a presentation. Before there was a Historic Commission in Opelika, before there were ordinances to protect our structures, I want to show you some of the things we lost. I didn't put this in a PowerPoint because I like to do it this way. I think it's more effective, so bear with me a moment. These are just a few of the most beautiful structures that were taken down, literally torn down, or fell down for neglect. We're not unique. This happens in cities all over America, all over the world. It happens in Montgomery. It has happened many times. I've done research. I've looked up a lot of things that this city has lost. And we, all of us, we are the people who have to have the passion to make these, to keep our historic structures. I get in heated debates with people sometimes about when they start saying, oh, it's beyond help, you can't save it. I went to graduate school in London, I traveled around Europe while I was there. I saw buildings that were so damaged during World War II that there was hardly anything left but the foundation. And they put them back because they wanted, might have not been exactly the same, but the part of the structure was there, enough to save. And once the entire thing is erased, then there's no getting any of it back. And that's the thing that we have to make sure we don't lose. These structures are the churches, the buildings, the theaters. I'm still getting a kick out of the fact that the cemetery was considered a recreational destination. I guess that's kind of interesting. But we have so many opportunities for preservation, but we cannot yawn through things that are happening around us and pretend that, well, there's nothing I can really do about it. It only takes one person's voice sometimes to get something started. And I hope that all of us in our respective communities and things that we do can continue to make historic preservation work. I'd be glad to answer any questions any of you might have about things we do or how we do it. We've got a few minutes.
Question. Question.
What size of your group? I mean, it's a membership group? Your group is a membership group?
Yes, we have a 20-member board of directors. We have approximately 200 members at large who are part of Opelika Historic Preservation Society. They pay membership dues each year, which can range anywhere from the minimum a student of $15 all the way up to a lifetime member of $1,000. Every dime from our membership dues goes to the grants that we give. That's how we fund those grants.
And how many grants have you given out so far?
We started the grant program 4 years ago. We've done 2 each year.
That's great. Good.
And these are things that we can do those things. We can cut through the red tape process that often with a grant, if you put it through a government agency, whether it's city, state, or federal, can sometimes take forever. This can be done in one meeting. So we've been able to get these grants in the hands of people when they need them quickly. And this is something, again, the Historic Commission of Opelika, we have several of those people who are also members of OHPS, and they will, if somebody comes before the commission to present something they want to do, they might say, hey, do you need some more money? Go see the people at OHPS and make application.
Mr. Dickerson.
Question.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Please.
Are there any resources that your group creates for the local community in order to educate them about, historic preservation?
Yes. We just collaborated with they asked us sort of, they did most of it, but the Historic Commission in Opelika just redid our historic trail brochure, which visitors can get when they come into Opelika. It has a barcode on the back that you can scan, and it will use your phone and it will take you on a guided tour of Opelika. That's something we just did. I know y'all have something similar. This is something we've just done. Again, like I said, we have speakers speak to different civic groups, schools if we're invited. We sometimes have school groups that come and visit the Brownfield House. because it is one of our, and the walking tours that we do. Sometimes student groups will take advantage of those.
Question, comment? Let me just ask you two questions in particular. Have you all touched the home of William James Sanford, former governor? Is his home still existing?
Oh, yes, sir. It's a private residence.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's a
Okay.
private residence.
Okay.
But yes, it's maintained beautifully. It's it's part of the north side, 8th Street Historic Preservation Society.
Right.
District,
Mhm.
And yes, it's well
Right.
maintained.
Do people in Opelika, are they aware of that being his former residence?
Yes.
Is that
very-
widely known?
Very much so. One thing that I found about the people in Opelika when I moved there, because when I first moved to the area, I lived in Auburn for 2 years. The people in Opelika take their preservation very seriously. We've had a room this size filled with people because they were building a high-rise apartment building a little too close to where people thought it should be, to the downtown historic district. Because people, and I heard this 100 times, we do not want downtown Opelika's historic district to look like Auburn. And we don't always have, depending on who is in office, from the mayor to the council people, it takes those people to be involved in historic preservation. If they are not on board, you're not going to see things happen like they need to. And the thing is, we have to get them on board. And there are ways to do that. You just encourage. We're about to have a mayoral election, so we're going to get some things put out there because we will have the ear, as you all know, in election years, often ears are more open. So we have a wonderful board of directors. Some of the old Opelika names, families that know. I have learned so much history since I've moved to Opelika, about Opelika, that I can find myself being able to answer questions that some of the old timers would normally have to answer. But I love it, and one of the first things I did when I moved to Opelika, I purchased a rundown historic house built in 1890 and put it back together and lived there because I couldn't very well talk the talk if I didn't walk the walk.
My final question, how many awards have you all received for what you do?
How many has our group received?
Yes.
We've gotten a couple of recognitions from the Chamber of Commerce and one from another group. We're not really about receiving awards, but we give a lot of them.
Okay, excellent.
We award, every year, 2 awards for historic preservation. One for a business, which includes churches, and one for a residence. They're presented a plaque and a yard placard. And we give 2 of those every year at our spring meeting. And we are much more about giving to the community than we are being recognized for it. They know who we are.
Sure. Well, Mr. Shane Dickerson, let me just say we are indebted to you for driving from Opelika this Tuesday evening, and we really appreciate your coming. And if you're not pressed for time, we may have some commissioners who may have a question for you when this session is over, and we'll talk some more. But we salute you this
plenty of time.
afternoon.
Thank you, and
so
let me
much.
just say, lastly, anyone, The welcome mat is always extended. If you want to come to Opelika, I will personally take you on a tour of historic Opelika. The Brownfield House is always open to you, and please feel free to come and see some of the things we do. And I thank you again for inviting me, and Dr. Bailey and Shaun. It was a pleasure to meet you, and this has been a real honor for me to do this, and I thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Moving right along, Mr. Shaun Rose, Appendix B, Resource Guide.
All right, yeah, so this is just a collection of resources that we'll be including in the draft revised ARB design guidelines. If you all have any comments or know of any other resources that we've missed, we'd be happy to take a note of that and include them in with the resources.
Question, comments? Anyone? Question or comment? Okay, there being no question or comment, do we have any updates regarding our staff?
Yeah, I do need to ask if we have two members, Camilla and Ella, who have volunteered to be on the plaque review committee. We need one more member to be on
Okay.
that committee.
Do we have another volunteer? One more volunteer?
Yes, sir. I'll be.
Okay, we do have one.
All right.
Thank you so much.
So
Appreciate it.
I'll be, as soon as I get the reports done for that, I will send them to you all and then prompt you to meet and discuss your comments, and then you'll bring that, any comments that you have and a recommendation back to the full board for the November meeting.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. Anyone has anything going on you'd like to bring to our attention before we close? Anybody has anything going on like to bring to our attention? All right. There be no further business. The meeting is hereby adjourned.